Hey neighbor, welcome back to ARTV. My name is John and it's time for another episode of I Got It Wrong, a series in which I admit fault, bias, or perhaps a changed opinion in regards to a past album review that I presented on my channel. And today, I'm looking at a record that I've been putting off for quite some time. As soon as I started a series called I Got It Wrong, I knew that Demon Days, the acclaimed sophomore album by Gorillaz, was up on the docket. It was gonna get a slot at some point. I put it off, and I think you're gonna see why I cringed so hard at that old review. I think you're probably already starting to get the picture even if you didn't see that review. It was initially released back in 2012 and it's since been deleted from my channel.
I'm not a huge Demon Days fan. I'm not a huge Gorillaz fan. I'm a singles guy.
That review was initially released in the spring of 2012, although I later deleted that in 2016 or 2017 out of sheer embarrassment. It was very cringeworthy for me, but I did keep a copy downloaded for myself for those historical archives to let it serve as a stain, if nothing else, a reminder for myself to go back and say, hey John, maybe don't ever do a review like this again.
My roommate lent me B-sides and Demon Days so I could review them. He's probably the biggest Gorillaz fan I know or have ever known.
To explain myself a little bit better, I was living with a roommate at the time that lived and breathed all things Damon Albarn. Of course, this included Gorillaz, probably his favorite project out of all of those, at least it seemed that way to me. And he kind of pushed the whole thing down my throat a little bit. I don't hold any grudges over it at this point. That would be stupid of me to do. I've let it go, but at that time, I was feeling very pressured, and that review just came across almost like a cold-shouldered spite to him instead of an actual album review of an album that deserved a lot more discussion. As the years keep flying by, I've struggled to fully get into Gorillaz, but I think I'm finally getting there. Around the time of the release of Humans in 2017, I was starting to come a little bit more on board. I don't know why that record opened me up, but I've always loved Plastic Beach, at least the majority of it, and I've really kind of done a transformation in terms of my initial thoughts on that record, and that's bled over and trickled into Demon Days as well. Gorillaz were a bit of an anomaly in the early 2000s, in the sense that some people saw the cartoon band thing as like a distraction from the music, style over substance, if you will. I didn't really see that as being the case. That was never a problem for me. In fact, I thought it was a very cool, alluring factor. It's like, oh, there's this other element to the band. There's other backstories that you can get invested in if you want to, but if you don't, then you can just enjoy the music for what it is, and the music definitely stands on its own 2 feet. Originally, I complained about the changing sound within the music, that it was all over the place, that it didn't feel like it was coming from the same band, and I guess that could be seen as a problem, but also it was kind of forward-thinking.
For me, it's kind of a mindfuck because there's just too many genres going on. Like, am I listening to the same band right now?
It's hard to look back and see how exactly I came to those conclusions because I feel that this record has such a good ebb and flow. It's like the tide coming in and out. Little waves here, maybe a bigger wave there. There's some more challenging tracks that do get a little bit more confrontational. Oh Green World being one of those, All Alone. A little bit more high octane, high energy, if you will. But this record never really compromises itself in that regard. Demon Days really goes for it when it comes to breaking down genre barriers that were put in place, and it just seems like they were kind of steamrolling over them. And at the time, that might have been seen as unfavorable, and maybe that's why I had that ingrained in my head. I had to shake that loose a little bit, but now that I don't have those preconceived notions and I look at this as an adult that tries not to have any bias towards a record that he listens to, it opened me up a bit. This was a free spirit thing for me starting around 2017, and the floodgates opened a little bit more. It's still not a record that I entirely love every single second of, but I've certainly done a 180 in a lot of ways. Speaking to those blurred genre lines, we have some great synthetic moments here, with keyboard drips popping in on something like Kids with Guns, and children's choirs backing tracks like Dirty Harry and Don't Get Lost in Heaven. These are weird pairings, but oddly enough, they really nailed down some sort of mood, and I'm really getting drawn to it at this point. We've also got some magnetic guitars that I do like because they're not always throttling in the mix at all, And I know this record gets described as alt-rock, but I do like what Brian Burton, aka producer Danger Mouse, did with the sound of this album. He has his hands on all of these tracks alongside Damon and a few other collaborators, and they just really make sure that most things are really popping in the mix, but it's also not too crisp where it feels a little bit too overly done, but also not too underdone that it feels too raw. It's just that good balance right in the middle. We also have some looming bass, obviously Feel Good Inc. I would say that that's one of the most iconic bass lines of all time, and other pop tendencies mixed with hip-hop styled production that meets both the old and new school. These are good combinations. When you really sit down to think about it, Demon Days was one of those albums that really started pushing for this new idea, this new narrative of saying, yes, we can have a narrative in the album, there is a loose concept here, but also we can break out of that and we can have different tracks and different genres that are consistently moving all around the clock, keeping things spinning to keep it interesting. That can play out to bad results, and I've seen it happen way too many times. But with the right artist, the right producer, the right engineer and mixer, it can play out quite well, and Gorillaz proved that they can pull that off on Demon Days. The overall concept deals with demons of all shapes and sizes on each and every track, and I like the way that it moves there. There's a different topic on each song, and there's lots of political gusto and allegories for climate change, humanity's future, and the world at that time after the 9/11 tragedy. Sometimes it does feel a little bit like they overloaded the gun clip when it comes to the features on the record, which is why I prefer Plastic Beach or even The Fall a little bit more. It's a very reflective album. It's not always for any mood, but still, I enjoy it, especially when Damon, aka 2D, is getting his own song, Busted in Blue from Humans, for example. But I do like this album's collaborators. I'm not slamming that aspect at all. It really makes some of these tracks work, and obviously songs like Dare are pretty much entirely Sean Ryder. It's not that there's a ton going on lyrically, but there doesn't have to be, and that's what the old me couldn't grasp.
That's the thing, I can't relate to any of the songs. That's what I like about a lot of music, is that I can relate to them. But the lyrics are just nothings.
That old review was also very painful for me to watch because I did spend so much time talking about the lyrics and how they felt aimless or no ambition or I didn't understand them. Did I even bother to read them? I don't remember. But looking back at this review, I don't think I did. I don't even think I tried to think about it on a different level. So now, having a little bit more understanding and seeing the connections that Damon and his lyrical guests were making in terms of the world at that time, I get it. I guess the biggest rut that Demon Days seems to fall into is the redundancy towards the end of the album. We do get some repetitive tracks, and I already name-checked a couple of those. Oh Green World is one that gets on my nerves. And also, towards the end of the album, I'm not crazy about White Light. There are elements that I do enjoy, but it presents a problem that last little quarter after, say, November Has Come kind of has going on throughout. Before I detail some of those more negative feelings, let's start by putting some of that negativity in the rear view because overall, I really have turned a new leaf when it comes to appreciating the record, so we'll start by talking about Kids with Guns. This track feels oddly calming to me despite some of the darker lyrical tendencies that do provide some socio-political commentary. I love that synthesizer that just feels like a carnival wheel, just going all around. You can see the top and then you go back down to the bottom. And then there's also some moving bass, extra percussion on this track that I thoroughly enjoy. And then there's a track in between there that I don't care for quite that much. Oh Green World has already been name-checked that I don't want to spend any more time there. But right after that, we move into a track that features the San Fernando Valley Children's Choir. That is Dirty Harry, and that is a wild moment for me. The first time I heard this song, I was much younger, probably about 14, 15 years old, and I felt conflicted on it. I did go out of my way to download it, but I didn't listen to it all that often. I was mainly focused on the singles like Dare and Feel Good Inc., of course, and this track continued to grow on me, and at this point, I just feel like that children's choir is haunting, but it does such a great job. There's an underlying almost dance groove to the track. November Has Come featuring MF Doom takes us on a wild left turn. It is very atmospheric and reflective in a way. That hook from 2D is great. That's the best part about the song for me, at least in terms of it tying it all together, but also the verses and the commentary that we get there. Let's go ahead and tag team the singles because there's three main ones that do stand out here. We already talked about Dirty Harry, and the remaining tracks would be El Mañana, Dare featuring Sean Ryder, and then of course Feel Good Inc. featuring De La Soul. Feel Good Inc. is still my favorite Gorillaz song. If you saw my top 10 Gorillaz countdown, sorry for the spoiler, there is a card on screen if you want to check that out. But I love that song so much, the bass, of course, but the lyrical content, the overall flow, the guest verse, the laughing from De La Soul, it's borderline manic, and I love it still to this day. What a killer tune. If you're looking to get more into Gorillaz, I would say that Feel Good Inc. is of course a great place to start, mainly because it feels like a melting pot of everything that they do, alternative rock, some ambience, pop tendencies, and then hip-hop coming in as well. It's a great tune, and it's praised for good reason. It continues to stand the test of time, but you also wouldn't go that wrong by checking out Mañana, which is very chill. I love Alburn's vocals on that track. He just feels like he's pondering, thinking out loud in a way. I love the wispy guitar there that just really carries you off into the distance. And also Dare featuring Sean Ryder. Yes, it's repetitive, but for the love of God, please don't be one of those people that writes it off because it's too repetitive. I think that was one of my initial mistakes with this album at large, but for whatever reason I did get into Dare. But just be prepared to dance, and especially if you're listening to the drunk Sean Ryder live version. Yes, unfortunately, there are significant lulls in this album's pacing for me that do push things off the cliff ever so slightly. The last quarter of this album, as I mentioned earlier, is a little bit weaker. It's not something that I want to just say is awful at all, but there's tracks that I just continue to skip over, like All Alone, featuring Roots Manuva. It's okay, but after hearing it more than like twice when revisiting this album, I was like, I get it. I don't care for the pitch-shifted vocals, I don't care for the vibe of this track overall, so not for me alongside the likes of Oh Green World. To oversimplify, yes indeed, my opinions have changed pretty drastically on Demon Days. I initially rated this record a 3 out of 5, although it seemed like I was talking about it more like it was a 2 out of 5. I kept saying, oh, it's not for me, it's not for me.
Don't hate on me, please. From my opinion, I'm just sharing with you, not every album is for everyone, and I respect Gorillaz and what they do.
My new updated rating for the sophomore album Demon Days by Gorillaz is a 4 out of 5. I would love to know your thoughts on this record and my redemption review I Got It Wrong episode in the comments section down below, and don't forget to leave a like on the video while you're here. Well, that kind of felt like ripping off a band-aid, but it's a good kind of pain. It's finally out there. Updated thoughts on Demon Days. Anyways, any thoughts on Gorillaz, the UK band, let me know in the comments section down below. And if you haven't seen my top 10 Gorillaz, then check out this card here or tap here for another episode of I Got It Wrong. There's more to come very soon. Make sure you're following me on Instagram at ARTVJohn, and I'll see you soon for more right here on ARTV.